Welcome to the Wild Holy, where we explore the untamed edges of faith, mystery, and divine presence in the rawest parts of life. I'm Faith.
And I'm Stephanie, and each week we're bringing you stories of transformation and mystery and very deep encounters with the holy.
Today, our guest is Becky, a woman whose story is tender, fierce, and sacred. She was drawn into the wildness of the holy, not through ease, but through an aching wilderness of loss.
And really, grief became her threshold, and what she has found on the other side is not tidy or explainable, but it is curious and open and wild, and it's holy. So we're so grateful to have her with us to share her story. Becky, thank you for taking your time to be with us. And we would love to start with a little bit about your background, where you come from, both as a human and as a spiritual person.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week. Um,
Yay.
I grew up in New England along the coast in Connecticut and in a few little small towns, kind of moved around a little bit. And I grew up going to a very conservative, bordering evangelical, came from the puritanical movement church. And I didn't really realize how much that had impacted me until I was well into adulthood, because it was just the way that everything was. And I thought that there was only one way to be a person of faith, only one right way. There were many ways, but most of them were wrong. And so I spent a lot of years working really hard to be at the right church that believes the right things and studied the Bible the right way. And all of that started to unravel in my 20s as I realized there are people with very healthy spiritual lives that do not fit this one very particular color within the lines way of practicing faith. And that kind of, yeah, I kind of let the unraveling begin to happen. And then 10 years ago, my husband died. And that was kind of the little extra tug that allowed the unraveling to speed up and realize that the way that I had grown up believing and the way that I thought was the one right way of believing was not very kind or compassionate, certainly not empathetic. And when I really kind of started digging into it, thinking about the things that I thought were right, well, if those things are right, that means this. And I actually don't believe that. And so kind of needing to work backwards, find some new ways of approaching my spiritual life.
Interesting. So you found, within our subject matter of the wild holy, you found that the holy was much more wild than what you had originally thought.
Yeah, I would have been offended by the idea that the holy was wild for a
Uh-huh.
very long time. No,
Uh-huh.
it has to be concrete and it has to fit in these parameters, and otherwise it's dangerous.
Mhm.
Um, but
And you're
just,
talking about like doctrinal ways of being or
yeah, like having
moral.
the correct beliefs, right? And
Mm.
interpreting the Bible the correct way and living the correct kind of lifestyle, and always having to find the correctness,
Mhm.
because if you're correct, then you can be certain that things are going to work out. And when you're certain, you feel safe and you feel secure
Mhm.
and you feel like God is reliable. And then you kind of get drop kicked out into the wilderness and you realize, like, oh, none of those things are actually true.
Mhm.
So for
So
you, Becky, like sorry, Faith,
no.
getting drop kicked into reality, um, it came through loss, major loss.
Yeah,
Um,
and many over the years.
yeah.
My mom's parents died when I was under 10. So in her late 20s and her early to mid 30s. And all along the way, I lost colleagues and professors and friends, a third grandparent. And then my dad died 8 hours after my son was born. And my husband died a couple years later, about a month before my daughter was born. And that's just the loss of people, right? There are so many other losses layered into that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did you find that there was one particular loss that really pulled the deepest thread for you in the faith unraveling?
I would say they each were a little tug in their own way. Grief is a
Mhm.
really good catalyst for change, for better or worse, because it makes you face the fact that the way that you expected things to be is not how they are. Right? So I felt that big time with my dad because I had always like he was born to be a grandpa. Right? Like
Yeah.
people who are just like born to be grandparents. And he would have been the best grandparent. And I think about he was like really handy and I loved learning things like that from him. And so when we bought our first house, to not be able to be like, Dad, can you come down for the weekend and help me figure this out? Right? That the loss of the life that I expected to have and the memories that I expected to make from him, that was just as painful as the loss of his presence. And then when my husband died, yeah, that was definitely a loss of we had thought we were going to grow old together and, at least have a chance at a long life together. And so that was hard. But then also my daughter never got to meet her dad. And every year when they start a new grade, right? We just finished up elementary school. I no longer have any young kids, and my husband missed all of that. And so that is it's those like ongoing secondary losses that I feel like really put the pedal to the metal on reevaluating, and it brings up a lot of emotions and questions and learning to not judge myself for those.
Mm. Do you find that you're critical of yourself kind of because of your religious upbringing was kind of ingrained in you? Do you feel like that's where that comes from, or do you feel like it's just that's just a natural part of the grief process, or maybe both?
Yeah, I think it is a natural part of the grief process because it catches us so off guard and we feel like there's something we should be doing or thinking or whatever. But a lot of it is definitely growing up, every single situation had a clear response. You raise kids and you have them memorize scripture and they go to Awana and they go to youth group and you do this, that, and the other, and they turn out right. And so when you experience losses, it's that reminder that actually you have no control over the outcome of things. Even if you've done everything the right way, that's just not how life works. And there is a real temptation when you have grown up in the more conservative evangelical American, especially white American church, to say, it's okay, God's got this. Like, there's always hope. I can be full of joy even when my world is crumbling. But that's not healthy because we were created with a full range of emotions. And if we don't let ourselves feel all of those emotions, we're not letting ourselves be fully human.
Mhm.
But I fought that real hard. I
Did
was
you?
going to be the one to prove it otherwise.
You're a pretty determined person. I
Yeah.
can see you doing really well with that for a while. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It took a long time.
Yeah.
So you were going to be cheerful, like determinedly cheerful, during during these major losses. But you have said before, I've heard you say before that you're something now of a hobbyist. I mean, it's a dark way of a dark and funny way of putting it, but like funerals are a hobby now.
Oh, yeah.
You're something of a grief and loss hobbyist,
Mhm.
which is a very funny and also dark way of looking at it. Um, I'm curious, just speaking of unraveling. So I'm really curious about what you said before. It's like the idea of like the holy, of God being the holy wild, the wild holy.
Mm,
That would have been offensive because the version of faith and community and God was like knowable,
mhm.
confined, contained, like
Yep.
domesticated.
Yeah.
And then life happens. I mean, life really happened, and some terrible things happened.
Mhm.
And that kind of was already in the process of unraveling, but just like got, scooched further down the road.
Yeah.
The ball of yarn kept going and going and going. And,
Yeah. There was no getting it back at that point.
there's no getting it's no getting it back. And I wonder, Becky, what you would have to say to folks who might be on a similar journey, given where you've come from and how far you've traveled?
I think the biggest thing is just to notice at first. Notice if you're resisting being angry, or notice if sadness feels scary. I mean, I still don't like to cry. I'd rather throw up. Like, it is the worst feeling for me in the whole world. But I had to learn to push through the discomfort to really feel the depth of those things in order to keep moving through the grief. I remember it's funny when I talk about and share the story of my husband's death, I talk about that night laying in my bed staring at the ceiling, just being angry and saying, "God, you really messed up.
Mm.
Like, this is wrong. Here I am, 8.5 months pregnant, and like I'm not like, this is ridiculous." Um, and people laugh and are so uncomfortable because they're taught to just trust God. And that just means like, yeah, that means you can't tell God that God is wrong, or you can't be angry, or you can't do anything except just kind of blindly follow along. And people get really uncomfortable when you say that stuff out loud.
Yep.
Yeah. Some
But
people do, yeah. And then
yeah, but it kind of comes down to, if you believe that God's ego is so fragile that you can't point out that something so clearly wrong and disappointing has happened, then like maybe find a different God. Like maybe maybe you don't know God all that well, or maybe you're kind of have missed a couple things, because there's no comfort in having to tiptoe around what has obviously happened.
so as you were laying there in bed and all of that reality of what just happened was hitting you, did you find it like and you're dealing with this anger towards I imagine this kind of anger is bubbling up towards God and telling him that he's messed up. Were you able to let that go in that moment and really be angry, or was that like a process for you of coming to grips with the fact that I'm pissed at you, God? This is really messed up and what's going on?
Yeah, I think I was able to let myself be really angry because we had known that my husband was terminal. And so we'd had a few months before then, knowing that we weren't going to have a tremendous amount of time. So I'd kind of already been opening up to the anger and starting to dancing around with it a little bit, I guess. And after my dad had died, I didn't let myself feel the anger. And that kind of manifested itself in my body not doing well because I was holding the anger so deeply and tightly because I wanted to grieve well. I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted to grieve correctly. And that, looking back, is a lot of pressure
Yeah.
because every grief is different. Every loss is different. Every person responds to every different loss differently. And so just letting myself feel all the things. It is a lot harder to hold onto your emotions and shove them down when your hormones are raging and you have a 2-year-old, like already not in control. So
That's really true.
I think that was maybe a helpful thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no holding on at that
Yeah,
point.
yeah, we're already screwed. So here we are.
Yeah.
What strikes me is that what I'm sensing is that there was this relationship with God, but also with yourself that was more contained, perfectionistic,
Hmm.
maybe had shame, like deeply buried shame around having very honest and understandable feelings, but that was kind of the religious context. But also cultural. I think a large part of how you and I have connected, Becky, is like we don't know how to agree. A lot of our culture doesn't know how to agree, doesn't know how to acknowledge loss collectively or individually. There's not enough space for the stuff that's kind of raw and jagged. And so the sense of coming through that, getting to a place that's more honest, even if
Hmm.
the honesty is revealing things that are uncomfortable, that don't feel tidy,
Yeah.
but actually just feel real. And that's sort of that's more honesty with yourself as well as God, right? It's like, it's not just like a higher being. It's also, I'm allowing myself to feel things that I didn't or couldn't feel like I could before.
Yeah, because for a lot of years, the faith communities that I lived in, if you follow the rules, then you're doing great. And it was like, well, I know that everything will be okay. I just figure out the rules and the structure and I live within that and no big deal. And then realizing that that's not really living. I can't even think of the word for it anymore. um it I had grown up thinking that there was freedom in staying within the lines and staying within the box. But now I realize that's kind of like one of my uncles always says, you can get whatever color car you want as long as it's black. It's an illusion of freedom, right? Like there's not really any freedom
Uh-huh.
there.
Right.
Because there's no accounting for or embracing of our differences. And so, yeah, grief has been this great teacher of me. For the most part, I've always been really aware of who I am, just because, I don't know, God took like the tenacious bucket and dumped a whole bunch extra in. But but grief has been this way to really examine that and say, oh yeah, I can fixate on rules and systems because they feel safe. But that doesn't mean that rules or systems actually create safety or actually give me what I want from them. And so having to examine in myself, am I gravitating towards this set of rules or this system because I'm desperate to feel safe or because they're actually helpful?
Right. And have you I know that we've had conversations about considering these feeling safe around rules and
Mm-hmm.
kind of processes and ways of being. And our both of us have this deconstruction of our kind of evangelical faith and having kids and wanting to have like a certain set of structures to bring our kids through in
Yeah.
order to raise them in a way that's going to lead to a good outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And as we left the evangelical tradition, we were kind of felt a bit floundering as far as not having that safe step by step. Teach your kid the Bible verses, send them to Awana, make sure they go to church every Sunday, get baptized, those sorts of things.
Yeah.
We're kind of going, crap now, So
Yeah.
I'm
There's no clear
wondering,
path anymore.
yeah. So I'm wondering in general, maybe specifically with the kids, like how have you found like a gravitational center outside of these very rigid step by step processes for bringing up kids, for being a person of faith, being a Christian?
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to have a really great answer, but it's been letting go of having to have a strategy
Mhm.
Hmm.
and really thinking through, well, what does it mean to be a person of faith? I don't always call myself a Christian because I don't always feel like that. So it means I've kind of at the moment feel most comfortable with a friend of mine, Charlotte Donlin. She wrote this book called The Great Belonging. And it's kind of posits that our spirituality or our spiritual life can be described in terms of belonging and like belonging or connecting to yourself, to others, to the world, and to the divine. And that's whether you call that God or the universe or whatever your vocabulary is. And so when I think about it like that, well, how can I connect with myself? How can I get to know myself? How can I ground myself? How can I like really find peace and really find joy? And doing more of those things. And so like Stephanie had mentioned, like curiosity has been this huge theme for me because if I approach it thinking, what'll happen if I try this? That
Hmm.
makes it feel a little less scary than I'm building a new ethic and doctrine and like, right? Like it kind of like,
I must find the next new answer.
yeah, exactly.
Answer.
It releases me from having to construct a new version of the old thing. And so when it comes to my kids, it's that kind of thing. It's talking about, well, what am I learning about myself, or how can I help them learn to interact with each other or get to know themselves better? And what are they curious about? We've had so many conversations about church, and we've actually taken quite a bit of time away from church for various reasons, but a major one of them being I've just had a lot of health issues, and the ability to just sleep in on Sundays and rest, like truly rest on the weekends, I've just needed that to survive. And so we've had a lot of conversations about, well, why do we go to church? What is church for? And I told them, for me, church is to connect with other people and to be part of a community. And ideally, it would be with a group of people or a community that helps you meet God, that helps you connect with God. And so we'll kind of ask each other, like, hey, we're all having a really hard time getting to church. Are we connecting with God there? Are we connecting with other people? And if the answer is no, then we're not going to feel guilty or full of shame for not going, and that's way different than you go to church because that's the right thing to do. And that's how you grow. And that's how check. I wouldn't say check the boxes, because I would have been offended if you had said that my faith was about checking boxes.
Yeah.
But the focus was on being disciplined in practices. And if you're disciplined and you learn, then you grow. Whereas now I'm like, well, you can know a whole lot, and that doesn't mean that it's had any impact on you at a soul level. Yeah. So it's still a lot of me kind of re-exploring what faith is for, and how it shows up in my life and how I can help my kids discover what it looks like for them.
Sounds authentic.
Well, that's good.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
I hope so.
It does, Becky. It sounds authentic. It sounds real. It sounds confused sometimes. It sounds like, searching for something that will work, and I'm there with you. But it does sound authentic. So, yeah.
What I'm interested too is that loss and the unraveling of loss, because what you're mentioning is like, and Beck and I have been talking about this too a little since I have like long COVID that flares up sometimes, that it's been changed my relationship with my body.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if you want to say that. I mean, so many people are dealing with so many things, but in kind of the wake of the COVID era, but before that also, there are just so many people who have had and will experience disability of some kind, illness, chronic illness. And so I'm curious about what you've learned, because it feels to me as you've been talking that it's more about the process. Like you pay much more attention to the process now than like hitting these benchmarks that might have been external at first, that then were internalized, right?
Yeah.
Which is what happens when we grow up. Like they're, external expectations, consciously or unconsciously, that then we sort of take into our being and replicate insofar as we can. And you're focusing much more on process, right? And process is messy and not perfect. What does perfect even mean? But I am curious about what that journey, if you feel like sharing, what that journey has been like with your body.
Oof, it has been difficult. Yeah. And so most recently, I've had long COVID since 2020. And hopefully for the most part, my body is really starting to heal from that. But what it also did was exacerbate or maybe flip the switch on all the way for rheumatoid arthritis. And I'm pretty sure I've always had it, but it was kind of like a dimmer switch, and it was on just a tiny little bit. And then with COVID, it's just 100%. And so, after my husband died, dealing with changing the expectations for my life. Okay, well, now we're rebuilding life. What does it look like now? It's so much different than I had dreamed or hoped for. Well, then the same thing has happened since having chronic illness and chronic pain. And we can't go hiking and we can't go doing all of these fun physical adventure things that I always hoped that I would do with my kids because I just can't trust my body. And even if I feel well enough to do it today, that could be the thing that sends me into a flare next week. And then I'm out of commission for a couple weeks. And so, like, constantly having to be aware of, do I have the energy for this? Do I have the strength for this? Do I have the lack of pain for this? And what will the cost be? And am I willing to pay it? And that's hard. The year my husband died, I ran a half marathon and I was a dancer. And there were just so many physical things that were a regular part of life that just aren't right now or are in a very, very diluted way. And you realize really quickly how much your health was part of your identity and how what you could do with your body was part of your identity. And then all of a sudden you can't. And there's a lot of feelings both internally and externally because our culture is very performance oriented and very behavioral oriented, right? If you do things the right way or if you do them the best, then you're a good person and you're contributing to society and you're making things better. Well, what about the year that I could barely get out of bed? Right? That really challenged I felt like I went around like apologizing to friends. Like, I'm so sorry. I've been a terrible friend. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, you've been surviving. Like, you are
Yeah.
doing the best that you can. But it felt like I was a failure because I used to have people over to my house all the time. I hosted huge cookouts for every holiday and had book clubs and Bible studies and just friends over whenever they needed to. And for the last 5 years, I've hosted pretty much no one because physically I can't. And that is really humbling and it's frustrating because those are things I enjoy, right? I want to be able to do the things that I enjoy, but mostly it is challenging to have to face the questions of, well, do I have worth if I can't do certain things?
Yeah.
And just grieving that life would be so different if I didn't have to deal with all the chronic stuff.
I'm wondering as you're telling us about this, like how, if any of these feelings you have towards like feeling like you need to accomplish a goal or be a certain way or do certain things in order to be of worth, do you find that that has like roots in some of the evangelical type of conservative stuff that you learned growing up? I mean, because, there was a lot of focus put on performance, even though it wouldn't have been said overtly.
Yeah.
That you need to perform and be perfect and good and do these certain things in a performative type of way. It was
Yeah. And
still very
I'm
much
trying really hard not to cackle because that is.
I love your do it.
Please cackle.
Please do.
Yes, because the question always was, who have you witnessed to? How are you impacting the world? What are you going to do with your gifts? Like everything was about what are you doing and what is the quality of that doing? What is the impact that you as an individual are having? And I didn't realize how deeply I had accepted that as a way of life until all of a sudden I could have no impact. And then it made me really sad that I never felt like I could just be or just live, but I always had to have something to show for it. Yeah, that still makes me really sad.
That makes me really sad too. And I feel that with you myself as well in a lot of ways, but I haven't had the challenges that you have. And I feel it very deeply for you, Becky, because like that's just to be I found it hard just to be like, find worth in myself just as I am, to be like, accept myself just as I
Yeah.
am in this moment. I still, a deep moment of meaning for me was when Stephanie, our friend Sarah, told me one time we were talking about love and God's love. And she said, love is accepting you as you are right now in this moment. And that really hit me because I felt like that was something God was teaching me in that moment. And
Mm.
that was a very, very much just something very different between the faith I was moving into and the faith that I had been in growing up.
Mm.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And I think, Faith, we've talked about this, but I know Stephanie and I have talked about how I used to think do your best meant think of the best that you've done of all time and then beat it. Right. And so,
yeah,
like, always raising the bar and always
yeah.
doing better. And that is exhausting, not to mention
Mhm.
impossible. And so, letting go of that and accepting, oh, no, I just do what I can with what I have in the moment
Mhm.
has been really healing because it allows me to have limitations, right? It allows me to have chronic pain. It allows me to just get done what I can on the days when I forget my ADHD meds and it's like my brain is being run by rabid squirrels, right? Like there's room for all of it when you let yourself be limited and be human.
Mhm.
I've been having some conversations with some soul friends, other soul friends in the last week or so. And we've been talking about how to be in this present moment, given everything that's going on politically and collectively. And I've been sort of as a spiritual director, I'm always kind of like listening for the should.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, people, all the people that I am blessed to know and be in these conversations with really want to contribute something, really want to impact something, really want to make a difference, which is
Mhm.
beautiful. And I think there's a big and. And I know for myself that I am a little bit too unaware of the ways in which I'm already contributing. Right. So we're still in that conversation, right? But still,
Mhm.
like even noticing like what I'm doing right now, already
Yeah.
doing. And then the second piece is what you're speaking to. It's like, is my being enough? Me just breathing or me not breathing? Like, I think that some of these religious systems, in a way, I feel like it's like Jesus is coming, look busy. There's been a real like missing out on just the ground level. Like it is a gift to be. It's not always easy to be, but it is, or at least we can be neutral about it. Like I am. We can at least say that. Like I am in all the ways and all the complexities I am. And I have been thinking about that a lot, not just in the context of activism, but just in the way that I think our religious and faith and spiritual systems have been so close to the mark and yet so far, so far away from that. And that's one of the reasons why I think I was telling Becky that one of like kind of my grounding spiritual practice is letting go. Because I think it's a thing that I need the most of. It's a thing I find the hardest.
Mhm.
And what about when it's coming to your story, Becky? There's been a lot of not intentional letting go in the sense of like you've had people taken away from you a lot, right? A lot of
Mhm.
people, your health in some ways, right? Taken away. And there's just profound loss in that. And there's also all of these other pieces that you have allowed and consented to be take away that
Mhm.
have revealed the life that is here, like the real life that is here, not like building castles in the sky, but the real life that's like lived on the ground. And I think so many people, this is just by like pet theory. I guess it's our podcast, so we can we can like
Yeah, you get to
we
have
can
those.
Let it
tell our
go.
pet theories. But I think people are craving real life and permission to be in real life,
Mhm.
whatever that involves in any given moment. But more than that, also to accept and to feel loved in that real life. Okay, sermon over. Just wanted to say that.
I love that.
I sense from so interestingly, one of my college students who is disabled, she would often say when we were in chapel reading a scripture, usually from the Gospels, about someone disabled, she would say, "Why does Jesus have to heal the disability?"
Hmm.
She really pushed back against that. And I said, "Well, I'm not here to defend Jesus. Jesus could defend Jesus." But he often asked people what it is they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that to be really compelling. Like, what do you want? What do you actually want?
Hmm.
It's a hard question sometimes, but it's a good one.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it really is. Because, did I want my husband to die? Absolutely not. Of course, obvious. Like, no.
Mhm.
But I have a good life now, right? Like, do I want to be dealing with chronic illness? No. But it has forced me to be present and be aware in ways that I never would have been otherwise. Like I've been working on this book, and I don't think that I would have had the frame of mind to question the fact that grief and mental or physical illness, burnout, like all of these different parts of life that we find ourselves in, they require different spiritual practices. You
Hmm.
can't force yourself to keep right. Growing up, it was you go to church, you study your Bible, you serve.
Uh-huh.
Well, if you physically can't go to church, what does that mean? Like, if you, for intellectual or disability or whatever reasons, can't read a Bible, never mind study it, does that mean God's like, oh, well, womp womp. Like, I guess you don't get to have a faith, right? Like, no. And recognizing that if that is how, if God really says the only way to have a rich spiritual life is to go to church, read your Bible, and serve. Well, I guess no thank you then, because that's not something I want to be a part of. And so I kind of was forced to accept that, well, maybe there are other things out there, other ways for me to connect with God, or other ways for me to connect with myself, for the world, and really letting myself explore those things and experience those things has been a comfort to begin with, because it has released any pressure that I felt to do things a certain way. But it's also helped me to discover that it's important to learn how to be gentle with yourself. And that if your faith or the way that you've created your life to be, if there is no room there for gentleness or for kindness towards yourself before anything else, that's worth a look and questioning what's going on here. Because if I can be now 10 years a widow, raising kids on my own, dealing with chronic illness, navigating all these other things, and I can be gentle with myself, like I feel like after I've kind of defied and disappointed everything about how I thought life was supposed to be, I think there's a pretty good chance that other people can figure that out too.
So what have you learned? What's your favorite way to be gentle right now?
Um Honestly, anyone who knew me growing up will laugh, but quiet. And that has been one that's been really difficult to explore in many ways. One, because I was always the kid who never stopped talking. Um, and
Faith has
also,
one of those.
yeah.
He's
uh,
delightful.
yeah, absolutely. But also, not being diagnosed with ADHD until my mid 30s, I always needed background noise to help my brain focus. And so I thought that silence or quiet was never an option for me. And having, well, being shut in your room for several months without really contact with the outside world will force you to get to know silence. But there's something about, even if it's just 5 minutes in the bathroom by myself, that those few minutes of quiet are like a release from any pressure to do or say anything other than just be and just exist.
And so do you try to carve out ways to find silence, or do you kind of just let them come to you and grab them where you can?
Mostly I just let them come because, one of the beautiful things about ADHD is we try really hard to organize and dictate our lives, and then it all falls apart. And then you end up going and chasing a rabbit trail anyways. So instead of trying to be really structured, just like one of my other favorite things is walking labyrinths. And earlier this year, the kids and I were in Seattle for the 10th anniversary of my husband's death. And we just kept like bumping into labyrinths. We're like, great, let's walk another one.
Oh,
Here we go. Right. Like, so I had kind of looked them up, but we weren't going out of our way to make sure it was on the itinerary kind of thing.
uh-huh.
And just whenever I bump into one, like, oh, great, pause.
Nice.
And that way, the connecting, the belonging part of my spiritual life is something that can happen at any time, not only the prescribed times of
Mhm.
Sunday morning and Wednesday night and, whenever else.
What I love about that is it's sort of like letting God, the holy, the divine do the work. Like,
Hmm.
in the system before, it's like, you're working so hard to make stuff happen. And instead, I mean, in contrast to that, like wandering through Seattle at this really precious and tender time, like a little pilgrimage, like you just
Hmm.
happen upon all these labyrinths.
Yeah.
And it's like this beautiful, like gentle kiss of a coincidence. And it's like that's where most of the effort should be is on, but also maybe part of the dance. Like before there was no dance, it was rigid and fearful. And now there's like a dance. That's all I wanted to say. Faith.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the point that I wanted to just the thing that I noticed, didn't really want to make a point, but I just noticed that it's different. Like this journey that you're taking, the actions that you're taking in a faith walk are different for you than they are for, say, me or Stephanie or anybody else. Like everybody encounters the holy in different ways.
Yeah. And I think through a lifetime, we all encounter it differently too, right? How,
Different times.
yeah. There's no prescriptiveness anymore. And I really hope that in my life, in my work as a writer and as a spiritual director, like I can help people just to explore and be curious about what are those things for them.
Hmm.
Because a lot of it is just a big experiment of, well, what'll happen if I try
Hmm.
this? And sometimes you hate it and maybe you revisit it later and it clicks.
Yeah.
But just being open and curious to the exploration.
And that's where it's helpful to have like the ADHD traits that you have, where you have a tendency to like want to like rigidify things into a certain thing, right?
Yeah.
But it's helpful in some ways so that it can be applied at the right time. If you can have the looseness, give yourself the looseness, like that quality of yours to highlight and define something can be helpful to then give it to somebody at the right time,
Hmm.
the right moment for the right person.
Yep.
So yeah, it could come together in a really nice way for your gift to somebody else.
So as we're kind of moving to the end here, I'm thinking about what I'm hearing and receiving has been a lot about like trusting yourself,
Yeah.
trusting your experiences of life, even as they're painful, trusting the holy. And what that looks like isn't always what you expected it to be,
Hmm.
but there's an underlying sense of there's something here. There's like a ground of our being. It's not within our control, but it's present. And I'm wondering, Becky, given what you're noticing about our world and where the folks in your sphere are at right now, what about your story do you think might speak to our collective moment? That's a big question.
That is a big question. Good job.
Thank you. I feel like Faith goes, it's like microscopic, and I go cosmic. Not
Yeah.
always, but can you tell I preach every week? Oh,
Yeah.
good Lord. Anyway.
I think it is so important to be aware of the gifts that you bring. Like you said, Stephanie, like what are the gifts that you are already bringing? For me, that's been wrestling with wanting to be physically part of the activism happening, but recognizing that I am a single parent with physical disabilities. And so maybe that's not a wise choice. But I'm a spiritual director who works from home, which means that I can bookmark X number of sessions a month for people who are leading the activism and who need more support because I'm already in a support role. So that's the first thing, is being aware of the gifts that you're already bringing. And the other is that you have limitations, because we all have limitations. Even if you're only, maybe you're a lucky duck and your only limitations are that you have to sleep at night and you have to eat food. And you have to stop and go to the bathroom every now and again, right? But there's still limitations, and it's okay. There has been so much peace and freedom in accepting that being human isn't a fault. And just recognizing that no one is expecting me to be faultless. Nobody is expecting me to have unlimited capacity. And so I need to not expect those things of myself either.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I feel like there are 10 different places we could go from here and have 10 other conversations.
Yeah, for sure.
So, Becky, thank you for taking your time with us and to share so much of not just your story, but yourself with us. It's been beautiful. Yeah. And I know that you've been working on a book. So we wanted to give you a chance to plug your book and when we can expect it.
Yeah, it'll come out next summer. I think it's April, May, June-ish. It's kind of in that book release window. And it is just about spiritual practices that are gentle and kind, and finding how to explore and find things that resonate with you. And it has been a real joy and a gift to work on, because I've learned so much from it just through the writing process. And I really hope that it can feel like a safe enough first step for people to start their own exploration.
That's
so
great.
A gentle
sounds
book.
like sounds like a good resource.
Yeah, I'm excited about it.
So a gentle book about gentle resources.
And where can people find your book when it's released?
Well, I'm on social media everywhere at Becky L. McCoy, and my website is beckylmccoy.com. I have a newsletter that will have all of the book information, and it's just a short little thing that comes out each week with something that I've been thinking about, something that caught my attention, and something that I wanted to share, usually some kind of resource or album or art thing, just that I think people would appreciate. So all the book info will be there.
Great. Okay. I'll put the link to that in our show notes, so it'll be there. Thank you so much for joining us, Becky. It was really nice to have a conversation on a podcast with you, although we've had many conversations in the past. And it's always great to talk to you. You have a lot of great insights, and I appreciate your authenticity, as I said before, and your honesty about where you are. It's always like an encouragement for me in my own journey. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you. I'm just thrilled that you're both kind of creating this place for stories and conversations that will really benefit a lot of people.
Thank you.
We're so glad to be doing it. For me, it's been a really fun project. I always feel, I don't know if you feel this way as a spiritual director, Becky, that you hear so many amazing stories.
Mm-hmm.
Almost every time you meet, there's something, because the holy is alive, active, and wild in people's lives. And sometimes it just takes a little bit of a reframe, or just a hey, have you noticed that?
Yeah.
And there the holy is right inside people's lives. So Faith, where can folks find you?
People can find me at calliopesnest.com. And it's there. I provide support for spiritual workers, thinkers, and creatives who are trying to bring inspired visions to life. And so I help them by listening to where God's leading them and helping them make plans and help them technically implement those plans through all the things on the interwebs like websites, social media, YouTube channels, etc. So
And Faith is helping me. And if she can help me, she can help anyone. You can find me over at brightsoul.org, where I'm nurturing the bright in all of our souls. And thank you, listeners, for being here with us, for making space for the wild and the holy in the world and in your own life. And until next time, may you stay attuned to the wild, holy within you, around you, always. Thank you.